My life as a librarian started when I was in grade 6. I had signed up to be a student librarian, a student who watched the library and performed basic circulation and shelving duties when the school librarian was busy teaching French. Students were allowed to borrow 2 books from the library at a time, but the library's circulation program allowed them to borrow 4. The librarian told me that the limit had been set so that when classes came in for a weekly library visit, their students did not have to wait until everything had been checked in before they could borrow new books. Then one day while I was working at the library, my class came for its regular visit. 2 of my classmates returned their materials and commented about only being allowed to borrow 2 books at a time. To answer honestly, and to show off a little, I told them that the system actually allowed them to have 4 out at a time. They started to walk away, excited that they could borrow 4 books, and I had to call them back and quickly explain. In many ways, that one interaction explains my whole library career. I've always wanted to help, and I've always tried to give the fullest answer and the best service I can, even when it's awkward and time-consuming. In 2008, I completed my Library and Information Technology Diploma program and started a job as the Head of Technical Services at the Tumbler Ridge Public Library. My position officially involved processing new media, handling interlibrary loans, and discussing overdue materials with patrons, but things expanded from there. A few months after I started, the children's librarian was sick, and storytime needed to be covered. At that point, my experience with storytime was limited to what I had learned while completing my library technician diploma. But I had seen the children's librarian lead storytime a dozen times, and the prospect of the children missing their storytime far outweighed my own nervousness. After managing that first awkward storytime, I started covering storytime every few months so that I could become more comfortable doing it, and so the children's librarian could have a bit of a break. I even came up with my own songs and stories to share with the children because I was excited and wanted to give them something new.
The door will shut the door, hurrah, hurrah. The door will shut the door, hurrah, hurrah. The door will shut the door. My sneezing stops, I'm sick no more. And the big shoes off, and cover our carpet, boom, 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 boom. Very good, everyone. Thank you.
At the same time, I started providing another service. A Japanese patron lived in Tumbler Ridge, but due to the size of the town, we did not have any Japanese language materials. I had studied Japanese while completing my bachelor's degree and offered to try to bring in Japanese books for her through interlibrary loans. Another patron was mostly housebound and relied on his wife to drive to and from the library to pick up his interlibrary loans. After a spell of freezing rain that made the roads incredibly icy, I walked down to his house to deliver his books so that he wouldn't be left with nothing to read. In short, here's what I hope for in the future. I want to try for more. I currently work as a children's program coordinator, and this spring, on top of my regular programs, I'm also hoping to produce a storytime program for children on the autism spectrum, and a coding program for young would-be app programmers. I may end up biting off more than I can chew from time to time, but I believe that's just part of librarianship. I'm going to encounter some failure in the process, but I'm going to learn from every failure and use those lessons to succeed in the future. Finally, I want to give back. So many librarians have given me so much in the course of my life. It's not practical for me to write multiple-page letters to each of them expressing my thanks, but I plan to do the next best thing. For as long as I'm working in libraries, I'm going to do my best to serve my patrons to the fullest extent I can. I'll continue working to find them the best materials, provide the best programs, and always protect their privacy and right to intellectual freedom. This leads me to my present job. Last week I gave a library tour to a local grade 5 class. At the end of the tour, when the students were allowed to browse the library freely, a boy came up to me. We had just visited the young adult graphic novel section, and he asked me if the library had more violent ones. He quickly assured me that he was just asking, and wasn't actually planning to look for them. I told him that our library had an adult graphic novel section nearby that contained things that were a little too violent or adult to be shelved in the young adult section, and that he was free to look. When I pointed out where those graphic novels were shelved, he told me again that he was only asking. I talked to him very briefly about intellectual freedom, and tried to assure him that as far as the library was concerned, he was allowed to read absolutely anything. That interaction lasted less than a minute, yet it embodied the holy trinity of librarianship. I provided helpful service to a patron, ensured and assured him of his intellectual freedom, and tried to protect his privacy by not asking him for additional details while his teacher and classmates were nearby. With any luck, I'll be doing much more of the same for the next 30 years or so. Thank you.